Bueno, llegamos.
All right, now we are reaching the last session of the day. And to do this closing act, we're going to discuss innovation and technology for methane management. We're going to hear progress when it comes to technology for detecting and reducing leaks, detection and repair, as well as capture and energy use. In addition to the challenges in terms of access and transfer of technology in the region. And for that, we're going to invite Leonardo Tamayo as moderator. He is from the Ministry of Energy from Colombia. We're going to invite also Mario Patiño. He's from Inside M. We're going to invite Diego León for Bridges Photonics. Want to invite Michael Ayandino for Hanoa.
Listo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Good afternoon, everybody. For the people that don't know me, I am Leonardo Tamayo. I am part from the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Colombia, as part of the Hydrocarbons Directorate. I want to thank Olade and all the organizers from these events. Personally, I will have to say that this is important because we're sharing experiences, not only as regulators, but also for the service providers, the consortiums, and all the society as such that could contribute to reduce methane emissions up to 2050. I want to thank you. And just to give you a little bit of context of what we are doing in Colombia to reach our goals. In 2022 and 2023, we have a legislation in which we provide some conditions for all the companies for exploration and operation in the country in order to have methane reduction. And up to this date, we have a baseline of measuring approximately 320 sites that we have on the country. With that, we're going to have a control of mitigations of such emissions that we have identified already. Clearly, this has not been easy for Colombia. We had the advice of some counselors and advisors that has helped us to understand how we can reduce methane. The next step as a country is to be able to identify and measure this as a government. It's not the fact that we don't believe what they are reporting to us, but we want to have the control of these emissions. We want to know if maybe what they're reporting is what we're measuring, and that's one of our main goals. Further to that, I would like to mention that we want to regulate everything related to the midstream and downstream. Downstream, we have progress on the draft of a resolution where we set some conditions for refineries in the country to start with the methane mitigation process. Even if they're doing it, we need to have regulatory signs. We believe that in our country, it's important to have this in 2026. I believe that this is a relevant challenge. I just want to thank you, and I want to share all of these spaces that we have. When it comes to technology, I believe that this is relevant because this is a starting point for us as decision makers, for you to know how do you want to build this legal framework. We don't want to paint a picture that we're not going to be able to do if we're having, legislation that is not going to be accordance with the technology. We need to know what technologies we have available, what are the costs of this, because this needs to be feasible enough for the legislation to work. And thank all of you. First of all, I would like you to introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about what does your company do in order to answer the upcoming questions. First question would be, what would be the main technological progress or advancements currently available when it comes to mitigation? Yes, my name is Mario Patiño. I am a Chief Revenue Officer from Inside M. If you don't know Inside M, we are an American company with a headquarters in California. We have been measuring the first basins for more than 10 years on oil and gas sector. We have 5 years of experience here in Colombia. We have been working with operators in Colombia, Argentina, Brazil. We have been working on voluntary initiatives for them in their own decarbonization plans, but also we have been working on the OGMP initiative. We are working with 2 operators in Colombia, 1 in Brazil, and there's other type of initiatives like what Leonardo was mentioning. We have methane legislation in Colombia, and several operators are using such data. When it comes to methodologies, what we are doing is overview the production fields and the transportation assets. We actually have an airplane that helps us see what's the efficiencies in cost. Every time that we're flying, we are like 2,000 feet over the fields, and we start seeing what's the profiles of leaks of these basins in Latin America. Regarding the profile of each of our operators, we could have a certain adaptation on the frequency of the inspections and the sensitiveness of this in order to have this a cost-effective manner and to consider the particularities of each operator and the basins as such. Thank you. Well, thank you, Leo, by the way, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marco Cota. I am the CEO from Talanza Energy. We are at 100% Mexican company. We have a branch in Colombia. Our operations basically include upstream, mainstream, downstream. In Mexico, we have been working with a company in Colombia. We have also a recent company in Chile, and we're hoping to start a project soon here in Peru. Our company, basically, it's devoted to doing detection, quantification, and consultant services for detection, and quantification, and reduction of the methane emissions. Your question, should I answer it now or? All right, perfect. I would answer it then. And the question was? Yes, the main technological advancements. All right. So in Talanza, we actually acknowledge the international principle, right, which is something that we're talking about a lot when it comes to methane emissions. And of course, it consists on detecting, quantifying, and we don't have silver bullets here. There's not a single technology that could solve this problem. And the best approach that you could have is a multi-scale approach that would consider top-down solutions, such as the one that was just mentioned, and also bottom-up solutions with OGI cameras, with high close amperes, with laser detectors. There's a huge variety of solutions, and I would even consider using soap in some of the machinery in an effective way. It could help us to have data analysis, because you could be talking about drones, satellites, things that could be quite futuristic, when actually information that the company have in their own database could help us in order to have a proper diagnosis of where they have problems. Each project requires a different solution, and that's the main challenge that any company has, particularly the ones in our region. And, well, that's my comment. Good afternoon. My name is Diego León. I am the Global Business Development Manager for Bridger Photonics. And I want to thank Olade. This is the first time that Bridger Photonics is involved in an event in Latin America. We were lucky enough to participate in different events of methane in the world. And like I was discussing with Gaston yesterday, I am quite surprised now, because I'm seeing the quality of the organization, the panelists. So I am quite pleased with this summit and how this organization is going. Bridger Photonics is a company that was founded in Montana in the U.S. about 18 years ago. But about 5 or 6 years the development group had a product that is called gas mapping lidar. Basically, this is a sensor which is similar to what Mario from Eyesight M is doing. This is installed in an aircraft, and we fly near the facilities of the oil and gas sector. We work in upstream and downstream. This is a leader that is being used to go through the cities and find methane emissions coming from these areas. We are flying at a lower height, actually, in order to detect leaks that could be in the range of 1 kilogram per hour. But we started with this type of service. That's the service from Bridger Photonics. As a company, we were only focused in North America, the US, Canada, but we were thinking, of course, what were the initiatives coming from the rest of the world. A while ago, we started working in Australia, and recently we have reached Latin America. Our first project in both countries, by the way, was leveraged by Chevron. This is one of our main clients, and they are participating in OEMP 2.0. And actually, by doing measurement with them, we were able to reach other areas of the world. That's what Bridger Photonics do. We detect air measurement, and we have also used drones, particularly to have allergy measurements in these facilities, and offshore, as you could see in Brazil, Mexico, and so forth. This is what our company does.
English, and my apologies because I can't speak Spanish. But let me first thank you, everybody. This was a great session, as my colleague was speaking. Great job by Olade, and I'm really impressed with the work being done in Latin America right now. So my name is Nilesh Joisar. I'm the Global General Manager for Honeywell's Emissions and Energy business. Now, when I say that, we cover, as Honeywell, we have a lot of portfolios. So what we do is we have kind of an entire framework that we can kind of support, which is like the entire MRV value chain, you can say, which not only just helps companies, like we help them do measurements, we help them do reporting, we help them kind of support through the entire protocol of this verifications and rectification reductions actually. So the way we do it is we have point sensors, and as even Marco mentioned, not one technology solves all problems. So we kind of play in the space where we do from a detection point of view and quantification, we have technologies which can allow site-wide monitoring. We call it Rebellion. That was an acquisition we had done 6 years back as a technology. That's a camera sensing technology. It works on cloud imaging. And we have point sensors. So basically, it just goes very close to the points of emission. So once you detect it at a far level, we actually can go very close to the point detection and improve the accuracy of the equipment. So that's as far as the core sensing technology goes. But then we go beyond that, because today, the way it works, and I think just to kind of just add to what my colleague said, is we just don't want to do find out what the emission is or detect the emissions. We want to really go beyond that, and we really to find why that emission is happening. How do we solve that emission? And I was so glad to hear yesterday Juan Carlos, Ena, and even Omar mentioning about some of the initiatives they are doing. And it's actually playing through this entire value chain, not just find the emission, kind of do the detection and rectification alongside, right? So we play those entire space, including OGMP2 reporting, enabling the data for that, and going beyond in terms of how to support you for reductions also. So we have technologies like asset performance management. We have something on simulations that can help you do a lot of simulated based corrections. So those are the things that we offer as a technology. Thank you.
Vale, muchas gracias.
Thank you. I know that many of you are going into the Latin American market. For us, it's quite interesting, particularly on the emissions. But for Marco, the question would be, what are the challenges from Latin America in order to implement the technologies that right now you have as a company or that you're offering as a company? Thank you. Well, most of the challenges, or part of the challenges that any company would face when it comes to detection and quantification, it's related to technical aspects. Latin America, it's not a simple region. Just to mention something, many companies do not have operations or availability of such technology regionally. That's why it's important to import such technology. And there's a whole logistics involved and costs associated to bring this technology. And another challenge would be the economical side of it. We need a strong investment in the beginning to buy cameras, to have high flow meters, and related to good practices, of course, everybody would need to receive training. It's not good enough to use technology or have technology from one country to the other if you don't have, at least locally, the necessary programs or training for the personnel. And we have seen many times that we have companies that have availability of cameras, but each OGI camera costs $100,000, and a company with medium activities or medium operations would require at least 2 or 3 cameras. They require more equipment. So these are fragile devices, and I could talk about Mexico, for example, on safety. For us, this is a huge problem because we need to move by land, and we need to go through areas that are controlled by organized crime. I'm hoping that, I know, sorry, that many countries have the same problem. I'm hoping that there are not that many, but these are the challenges. Discussing the good practices, a mechanism that has been effective in the U.S. has been MAPEC. There is a Center of Technology Assessment, which is in the Colorado University, and we just visited that facility, and this involves a model that it's effective, that involves the academia sector. And all the prototypes of such technologies are going to be tested with control methane emissions, and they can test how effective they are. And METEC is posting in their website the performance of each one of these technologies. For me, it would be an excellent idea to have an initiative now, because in a Latin American level, we could have these type of exchanges with the university, but we have multiple challenges from my point of view. I'm going to ask the question for the Honeywell entity. We know that you have lots of initiatives, but what would be the larger in Latin America, for example?
Yeah, so in Latin America, what we kind of see when we look at the framework, and I think that was some of the good analysis the friends in IEA brought up. Like, we do see a lot of initiatives, like at a larger scale, because as Honeywell offers a lot of decarbonization solutions, we definitely look at things like biomethane, biogas initiatives, and trying to bring those technologies. We look at a lot of carbon capture technologies. We actually are doing a lot of flare analytics, by the way, in terms of how do we kind of not only do DRE analysis, but even identifying flare kind of methane losses in terms of your combustion efficiencies and things like that. So in terms of the kind of technology and the challenges that we see, one of the things is how do we really get the ecosystem going, right? And like, even if I don't get into some of the institutional things and everything, I think in terms of enablements, like, I think what Marco mentioned, I can go a step forward, like in terms of what like countries like Canada is doing, like, right? Like similar to METEC, Canada is University of Calgary, but what they did was they partnered with Tourmaline Oil, which represents the Canadian gas companies actually. And what Tourmaline does is it allows all the technologies to be tested in the field environment. And it gives you an opportunity to not only test new technologies or any technologies that you want to kind of adapt and implement in, let's say, rest of Latin America, but at one company, like, can be identified or a 2 company in the region, and you can actually do a testing in the real-time field environment. Now, we are kind of pushing those kind of models because it helps for faster enablement of technology within the region. Because if you go to individual companies and the countries, everybody wants to test out the technology. Everybody wants to get a provenness of that technology, right? So when we are going to these regions which are growing or showing interest in this kind of technology, we personally feel that either, like, of course, we create, like, the gas associations of this company, or through OLADE, if that kind of an initiative can be taken, it actually fosters a quick enablement of technology rollout. That's very important, right? So as Honeywell, we definitely would want to see that kind of a setup here that can accelerate it, or a partnership within those frameworks that we have. That is something we can enable. We can also help with OLADE and try to set up things which can make things work faster. That is what we will do. I think from our perspective, since we are present in almost every country as Honeywell in Latin America, one of the things we are doing is our plans are, like, we are already doing it, but we probably would be reaching out to some of the companies that we already met during this forum. But apart from that, my team across the globe is currently engaging with all customers to see how we can educate them through regional workshops, and really, because it's all about awareness, it's all about technology, kind of, I would say, education that will enable this. So that's what we can do as a technology player. What we are doing with the governments and kind of enablement is, how do we really really encourage the government to have some form of a regulatory framework to make things happen? Because unless you incentivize the companies who is implementing these things, yeah, they are doing a lot of self-goals, they're doing a lot of this OGMP2 gold certification, and those are great things. But for them to be competitive in the regional environment or globally, we definitely have to incentivize them. So I think those are the things we definitely do as a advocacy whenever we meet the government officials, because unless we do that, and as a large organization, we need to do that as a responsibility. So we do our part just to ensure that we keep sending that positive message to the market and all the entities that are involved in this. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Nilesh. Creo que te me adelantaste un poco.
Thank you so much. I think you got ahead of me a bit, but I would like to take this chance to ask this question to Diego and Mario. What do you think those incentives should be so that the government in every country begins doing that mitigation and quantification of methane? So you, as service provider, what do you believe that the government should do in order to incentivize companies to use that technology? Well, I believe that the duty of a regulation should be to incentivize measurement, right? We have discussed these 2 days that one of the most important gaps existing on this matter of methane management is a lack of measurements, and hence the importance of initiatives such as OGMP 2.0, because worldwide what we have seen, and I believe, Diego, you have seen this as well, and this is that often the emissions and the intensity of methane in operators is being underestimated or underreported, and that's not necessarily bad as long as what is being left clear is such great economic opportunity that exists with fugitive emissions. This morning, S&P Global was publishing the benchmark of operators in the United States that we regulate, and S&P is using our data. And what can be seen is that on the y-axis, they have methane values in leaks against production, especially with gas operators. And what we have noticed is that though that methane intensity tells how clean an operator is at the economic level, those same values and percentages can translate into losses in revenue for operators, right? As long as they are losses that they're having on their commercialized product. So I believe that the fact that the gap in reporting is leading for operators to be undervaluating those methane emissions. Also leaves very clear that there is an economic opportunity that is so significant, and it's a win-win, as I believe many have said it throughout these 2 days. So the duty of regulation must be truly not to hide that win-win, but actually incentivizing measurements precisely. And here we have many examples. There's a regulation just mentioned now in Colombia. There will be updates to it and the more, but it has increased measurements at 90%, which I believe was the figure that I read, that one of the companies in Colombia really began measuring. And then there's more punitive regulations, such as the previous government of Biden in the United States that was penalizing per ton emitted. So that has already been pushed back by the new administration. But what we see, and I believe this is common to all, that operators continue investing on these initiatives for methane management because it is something that makes sense, right? And what one of the operators that we work with says is that a clean asset is more efficient, and the financial will see it in their P&L in closing the year. So I believe that the duty of the regulation must be to incentivize measurement, and hopefully it happens in a harmonized manner with global initiatives, such as with OGMP 2.0, which currently is the most acknowledged initiative as to not have these divergences between local regulations in Colombia and Mexico. We know that in Argentina and Brazil they are coming with discussion, but hopefully it can be harmonized as long as there is an effect for export markets with importers in Europe that are already using OGMP 2.0 as the measurement framework. And that's what I can say in colloquial terms, to have more carrot, less stick, that does incentivize measurement to avoid that gap with regards to methane intensity, and not necessarily punitive, so that it is something that operators really adopt and they see that win-win. And I believe that throughout these 2 days, many highlighted this. Yes, I believe Mario said it pretty well. Actually, what we have seen in Bridger Photonics is similar, that with regards to measurements, we, on average, with the 20 largest companies we work with in the US, we are seeing a reduction at the order of around 18% year after year, which matches pretty well with the S&P report that Mario mentioned. With regards to how to incentivize or how to adjust those regulations to promote this measurement and what can we do for companies to begin adopting this technology, I believe that what we saw in the United States particularly was opening up the options and modernizing the existing regulation so that, for instance, they were only limited to perform specific measurements on site and determine a specific concentration in parts per million, against updating that to allow remote sensing measurements that allows concentration in a line. So merely opening up the technological options where we represent certain technologies, but currently there's satellite technology, aerial technology, drones, on-site lasers, high flow samplers. There are different modalities that can be adjusted depending on the need of every operator. And as Marco said here, not necessarily a single technology will help an operating company to cover all of its needs. So modernizing the regulation to allow many technologies, considering the technical capabilities of every technology, is what has allowed for that measurement to continue increasing, and for the very companies naturally will begin adopting technologies to perform that measurement. It is very interesting what's happening in Latin America with companies adhering to the OGMP 2.0 framework, and Florencia was telling this yesterday, levels 4 and 5, which involve measurement. They're required to do two kinds of different measurements: bottom-up, top-down, to perform reconciliation and to truly understand the emissions profile for each of the companies. This is a task that takes a somewhat broader perspective on how to adopt those technologies to perform measurement. So that incentivizes the countries somewhat on how to begin promoting this. I would see it, as Mario said it, also, the stick actually had not worked as well as it was thought originally in the States, but it did allow for those technologies to be accepted by most oil and gas companies. They unanimously said, yes, let's modernize the technology available and let's progress in that sense to really measure and understand that what I was somehow thinking that I was emitting with only generic emission factors, when I really measured, I began understanding a bit better those differences between the estimation and what's actually measured. So to finish, what we should be seeking is being able to open up the technologies that companies can use so that they fulfill the regulation. Great, Diego. Thank you so much. I believe that something for you as service providers is being able to identify those barriers. What obstacles do you see that Latin America and the Caribbean currently has so that those technologies can be implemented mainstream? So, Diego and Millet, you can help me to answer that question?
So technology barrier point of view, is this on? Can somebody hear me? Okay. See, from a technology barrier perspective, I never see technology barrier as a standalone thing actually, like in my experience. I don't think it's a technology barrier. I think there are a lot of things that are available in the market today which can solve all the problems. And I think one of the discussions yesterday we had was like today we have 80% of the emissions that can be solved with the existing technologies. So when it comes to the barrier, first of all, I think it's about how do we enable that usage of technology? I think that's the first problem. Like if you look at it again, I will move back to the same discussions my colleagues were having. How do you incentivize? If the industry doesn't see an incentivization, and that's like a policy harmonization in terms of, and I also agree, we shouldn't penalize. Like penalties are a good way to kind of get the disciplines in place. If that works, great. But I think the incentives are something that works even greater. So if there is a way where I think the industries and the associations within LATAM can come together, and like there are enough of good case studies already in the global world today, what's worked, what's not worked, contract for differences have worked, somewhere it's not worked, or like you can talk of great policies where some tax incentives have been given at a capex level, some at a production level. I think the more we kind of make that enablement happen, I think the rest of the things will, because today, even if let's say technology like players, we want to invest in this region, one of the things we look at it is what's the return of investment, right? And are we going to get like the companies to adapt to these technologies quickly? And if that motivation is not seen, we can come here and we can attend 20 events and meet 30 customers, but what is the customer's drivers, right? So I think unless we kind of look at it as a drivers, of course there are NDCs, there are the national goals that we have set for ourselves, but can we become more refined with a common framework on methane kind of plans, methane action plans? It can be at a country level, it can be at a regional level. I think those are the things, if we can address that, I think technology barriers will go away. And that's my view of it actually.
Sí, solo para complementar un
Yes, just to complement that a bit, that answer a bit, I believe that technology barriers actually, there is no barrier to bring in technology to Latin America. What's more, Latin America is one of the first regions in the world that is looking at the adoption of these technologies like the ones we're discussing here. So we're actually being pioneering in adoption of technology. Perhaps the only one that occurs to me is that there are some regulations that still limit somewhat the technology in the sense that the company can bring in an advanced technology for methane detection, but if it doesn't help you to fulfill with the regulation, then there's no incentive for the company to adopt it because you will have to do it double. So if it can be reviewed in every country to say, well, the regulation that we have is somewhat obsolete and it is only for going through the gas pipeline with a methane measuring device on foot against using a flyover technology that measures effectively and efficiently, for instance, modernizing the regulation a bit to allow for the company that adopts the technology to fulfill simultaneously with the regulation. That would be, from my perspective, the obstacle that exists, because for the rest, the technology is there, it can be brought in. There's no limitation from the perspective of the companies to get the technologies. What's more, the willingness is there. It's been discussed these last days, between yesterday and today, on the full funding aspect and the targets, the companies that adopt frameworks such as OGMP 2.0. So barriers, apart from that, I see no other that hinders us from bringing in technology to the country. Thank you so much. And I believe Mario was talking about a case in the United States with regulation that came from a regulation. Trump came in and made a regulatory change. So from your perspective, how do you see, how can it be guaranteed for the good public policies that countries have on matters of methane measurements can be sustained? I don't know if Mario and Marco can help me with that question, and I believe we can finish with that. Yes, it's a very interesting example, because what we saw in the United States is that though penalties came out from waste emissions charges beginning this year, operators continued with these initiatives. In fact, we this year have provided more services to operators in the United States without penalties, and that what it brings us back is to the conclusion of this win-win, where regulations should later highlight that win-win. Another example that we have, very interesting, and yesterday we were telling this with Florencia briefly, is that though in Argentina, still it has not taken, or not many operators have joined the OGMP framework. We have been working with many operators in the Neuquén Basin for 5 years on a strictly voluntary basis, and we are doing 2 flyovers per year. And what they have seen is that merely working on this practical issue with methane makes sense. One of the operators that we work with in Neuquén reported last year more than $3 million in additional income, only via the leaks that they were able to identify quickly and to repair them, to maintain that gas commercializable in the pipeline. So this is something that we have seen in Permian many years ago, but it's important to see that in markets such as Argentina, the economic benefit of this pragmatic management of methane is so relevant. So to me, I believe that, again, those policies should incentivize more and highlight more that win-win that is in practical management of methane. In these 2 days, it's already been discussed which could be some options, such as royalties based on performance, where there is some incentive for operators that are showing good performance with methane. We were just discussing funding issues and acquisitions, where that environmental component is taking more relevance every time. But I believe that summarizing everything that we've seen these 2 days, this is that the incentive and the regulation should go along with that win-win that we have so highlighted between all of us, instead of thinking about penalties and a more punitive structure, which I believe changes much how operators react to it. With examples such as in the US, where they thought that penalties would be really what incentivized operators to make measurements, and it turned out that incentives are very distinct with regards to the reaction, even much more than the penalties and the exposure that they can have due to being penalized. That's what I would say. Thank you. From my perspective, how to keep a regulation current, I believe it's something more or less impossible. The nature of the regulation is to evolve. I believe we should start there. At some point, we are talking about 2016, the United States in 2018, Mexico and Canada in 2022, 223 Colombia, they issue their regulation, and the regulation, what it seeks is to regulate an activity that, to that point, there's a level of knowledge and expertise on. Now things are very different. The OGMP, I believe, one of the major benefits from OGMP 2.0 is that it sets at the center the evolution of estimations based on national inventory or inventories by company made with generic factors, and it moves it toward measurement. That strikes all the difference on what was expected in those regulations. For instance, in the case of Mexico, one can make a baseline with generic factors or with specific factors. You propose a program for reduction of emissions for 6 years, and you cannot change the methodology. So the very regulation is blocking you to adopt the methodology that you used back in 2019, 2020, when now things are very, very, very different. I believe that, on one hand, regulations should be adaptable. There should not be fear in regulators to issue different versions either. Another good practice is to have a record of authorized technologies published on the webpage of the regulators that can be updated as there's progress with technology, and on the regulation to refer to those technological records. That is something that could help not to do as many changes on the regulations. And finally, since yesterday, it is clear the consensus on more carrot and less stick, or the win-win. For me, actually, I don't see too much of a problem in penalties and fines in other kinds of activities where waste is generated in a hydrocarbon, and it does happen. For instance, in putting gas to use, there are many countries that have a tax on those volumes, not for leaks, because the problem is that you don't know them. Only when you're flaring and venting can you know. If you have anomalous venting or leaks, you don't know it. So it's a full problem that is reduced to a lack of oversight by regulators. The issue with methane is invisible, it is odorless, you need technology to detect it. There is no silver bullet, it's not enough. Satellites or airplanes, nor cameras, nor lasers, nor drones. Everything must have a multi-scale perspective. And the issue is that government hardly can know whether a company is fulfilling or not, or complying or not, because it would have to adopt that technology or hire companies that are certified to perform audits. And what's more, since emissions are not ongoing, you may go at nighttime and there's a leak, and in the daytime there's no leak, and you didn't do nothing in the middle. So you could well be penalizing somebody that is complying. So it's a full problem in itself, and I believe that still there are many things lacking to consider on this matter, and I do believe that regulations should be instruments that are easily adaptable, and for governments to have these processes to update them more faster. Great, Marco. Thank you so much, and I believe that with this we would end. I would like to thank our panelists, and you would like to say something?
I think we kind of harped on some of the challenges, but I would also like to say on a positive note that within the existing things also a lot of things can be seen differently. Like, while of course we see emissions as an emissions, like if you think about it, anything we do as a self-goal or as a kind of a, as an initiative itself, that's why we call ourselves as an energy and emissions kind of a business. The reason is, if you solve an emissions problem, you are actually solving an energy problem. And if you start thinking that way, whether like with or without the compliance in the regulatory framework, even if each of the companies in the Latin America starts thinking about the global branding, the global competitiveness, and even solving the energy kind of an efficiency problem or energy improvement problems. I think, we did not wait for the beautiful world and a perfect world. Even within the existing world, we can do the things, and whatever are the savings by reducing emissions and everything turns into a very positive story. It actually gives you a competitive edge. It also prepares you with a lot of energy efficiency processes, improvements, that actually is going to give you a lot of dollar value in itself. So technically speaking, within this room, while we are all together, if we really look at solving the bigger problem, we can still go ahead while, of course, the world starts to improve and we always look for the better world. But I think there's a lot of positive things to look at things and make it happen, actually. Thank you very much.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you so much to all our attendees and those who are following us online for sharing in these 2 days of collaborative effort and sharing with technical knowledge, reflections, and questions. If there are questions remaining from the audience, you can later approach our panelists to ask them in person. Talking about capturing a moment, if you like to download the pictures, there is a QR code to do so and to have access to pictures from these 2 days. As we had been saying, cutting back methane is one of the fastest and effective ways to act before climate change. We will invite some closing words from the director of the observatory, Gaston Silva. Good morning, and guess what? Again, you'll have to hear me out, but I will be even more brief this time, but I'll continue breaking protocol. The first thing I will ask is that we receive all delegations. I will ask all delegates to come up so you can thank them as you represent the countries. You're in such important element in this exchange, so I would like to have you up here so you can receive gratitude or accolade from all our audience, and so you can have a picture taken, which seems so important to me. Sorry, we have no audio in the booth.
Adelante.
Please come up.
Bueno, quiero reconocer y agradecer.
I would like to acknowledge and thank the authorities and co-organizers who supported us, the Deputy Minister of Electricity, Iris Cárdenas, Marcelo Mena, the CEO from GMH, Santiago Rojas, Regional Director of CAF, the International Energy Agency, and the words from Fatih Virol, the current delegation, Bridger Photonics, Insight M, for trusting in our work and supporting us with your support. And I don't want to forget Andres Rebolledo, our Executive Secretary, especially for the leadership, the vision, and the trust to give us the freedom to organize the second summit. And I believe the commitment is from everyone, which was fundamental for the success of this summit. I'd also like to thank Peru, that opened up its doors and hosted us with warmth. Also to parliamentarians who supported us with a numerous delegation. I believe that gives us backing and trust to continue advancing our agenda to focal points that made this a true regional space with active participation from every corner of Latin America and the Caribbean. During these days, we had 11 panels, 40 speakers from 22 countries. If that doesn't show the importance of this matter regionally, I have no other figures to show the commitment that you have demonstrated. I believe we feel very happy and proud for having shared these days with government representatives, parliaments, multilateral bodies, academia, private sector, And not only was there exchange of experiences, but also key matters to our region. If we have to summarize the relevance and the importance to have precise data for effective planning, the regulation as a foundation for sustainable development, access to funding as a bridge to close gaps, and lastly, tech innovation as indispensable ally to attain our goals. So I invite you to keep these efforts, these shared efforts alive, and allow me to make two more announcements. First, to invite you to the Week of Energy that will be held in Chile from September 30th to October 3rd, and where we will continue strengthening exchange, and hopefully we'll have you at our third summit that we will briefly hope to tell you when it will be hosted next year. So thank you so much for all of your work and your attendance and your commitment, and we deem the public stage of the second methane summit as closed. Thank you so much.